We thought they were quaint, primitive bipeds playing with electromagnetic toys, obsessing over family units, recreational art, and open-flame cooking. Their so-called colony, Kessler-Nine, was a dusty speck in a minor arm of their star system, barely worthy of being labeled strategic. A glorified dirt farm with a solar array. I was posted in orbit for cultural monitoring, a punishment assignment if we're being honest. The humans called it a colony. I called it a scrapyard with plumbing. Their buildings were squared, ugly, like someone had tried to design a city using only memories and bad intentions. Their air defense grid consisted of 3 slow-rotating plasma turrets and something called a dissuasion drone, which by the looks of it was built from leftover kitchen appliances and what I believe was part of a lawnmower. They greeted us with smiles and baked goods. Baked goods. Can you imagine? My colleague Retaliation almost suffocated from laughing through his spiracles. A diplomatic envoy from a Class 5 civilization is offered cinnamon rolls and milk. I documented everything, their quaint rituals, their redundant redundancies, their sentimental obsession with recording birthdays, a species of children playing at civilization. I had front-row view from my relay pod above the northern ridge when the attack came. The Zaikhal fleet tore through atmosphere like a hunting claw through soft fruit. 8 warships, nothing subtle, firing shock-bore rounds and kinetic impact shells before even breaching comms protocols. Classic Zaikhal arrogance. Crush first, gloat later. I leaned back in my seat and activated my holorecorder. Let's see how long they last, I muttered. I gave them 2 minutes, 3 if the old turret didn't jam immediately. But then, nothing went as expected. The first Zaikhal frigate dropped, mid-descent in total silence. No counterfire, no plasma signatures. Just gone. Sensors blinked, error-coded, then rebooted. I saw the ship disassemble mid-air, like someone had revoked the laws of cohesion. The second vessel exploded from the inside, ruptured at 23 points simultaneously. No visible source. The remaining 6 broke formation instantly. For Zaikhal, that's unheard of. They're fanatics. They don't retreat. Ever. The humans hadn't even launched fighters. No alarms, no screaming, no scrambling. They didn't run, didn't panic. They just stood still. I zoomed in on the town square. Children were being moved indoors calmly. One man, bald in civilian overalls, looked up at the sky, narrowed his eyes, and said something. I lip-read the translation. Right on time. That's when I realized we had made a very stupid mistake. I replayed the footage no less than 17 times. I ran it through 10 separate analytic filters. I brought in a support AI from the diplomatic corps, rated to detect spatial distortions up to Class 11. It detected nothing. No external projectile, no gravitic shear, no quantum shift, no evidence of the human colony firing anything at all. And yet, ship number 3 split neatly into 3 equidistant segments, each falling at precisely the same velocity, as if politely excused from existence. My colleague Zaikhal, usually prone to hysterics or smugness, had gone silent. He stared at the screen with pupils contracted into tiny black dots, arms folded, mouth unmoving. His spiracles barely fluttered. Do you understand this? I asked him, trying to cloak my discomfort behind a dry tone. They didn't shoot, he muttered. They reacted. The 4th and 5th ships attempted evasive maneuvers. One dove toward the upper stratosphere, the other dropped low over the eastern mountain ridge. The one above disintegrated in a thin blue line that shimmered for less than a second before vanishing. The one below collided with something invisible. There's no other word for it. Mid-flight, it struck empty air and shattered like glass hitting steel. I couldn't even parse the energy signature. By then, the humans had begun walking. I do not mean that metaphorically. Actual walking. Civilians moved from buildings to shelters. Children were calmly escorted underground by older siblings and parents. No sirens. No recorded announcements. They moved with the same practiced silence as crew during a hull breach, but without the fear. They practiced for this, Retaliation whispered. This wasn't panic. This was routine. I checked planetary defenses again. Still nothing active. The turret grid was dark. No orbital support. No visible shielding arrays. My sensor data was clean. Too clean. The sixth Zaikhal ship turned tail. I will mark this as one of the galaxy's great moments of shame. The warrior priests of Zaikhal do not retreat. Their entire culture is built on never yielding, but this one ran. It made it less than 6 kilometers before an anomaly appeared. A thin, rippling distortion, barely visible, like light bending around an invisible thread. The distortion wrapped around the fleeing vessel and then collapsed. The ship blinked from existence. No debris, no fireball, just nothing. Erathal stood. They're using something outside standard spectrums. Gravitic? No, not that. Dimensional bleed? No known dimensional tech reacts like that, I said, tapping into every archive I had. We would have seen signatures, we would have... Then the bald man from earlier appeared again, standing atop a roof now, a child beside him. He had his arms crossed. The child looked up at him and asked something. The man smiled. I zoomed in and activated translation again. 6 down, 1 to go. Should we be worried? No, kiddo, they came here loud, but they'll leave quiet. I shivered. Not because of the words, but because I believed him. The final 2 ships tried to regroup. They entered high altitude, linked systems, began uploading a focused strike pulse, some kind of high-yield countermeasure. Before they could finish sinking, both lost main power. They plummeted. I expected fire, wreckage, explosions. Instead, both ships simply stopped falling 30 meters above the surface and hovered there. Not through their own systems. We confirmed total failure. Something held them. Then, and I swear by the black suns of Raktel, the ships were set down, gently, and then melted. Not burned, melted, softly, like someone had turned reality into a kiln set to exactly their hull composition's fail point. They puddled, curled, sank into the dirt. It had taken 7 minutes. Kessler-Nine had not fired a single shot. I had stopped laughing. 7 minutes. That was the duration recorded on the incident logs. From the time the first Zaikhal vessel breached atmosphere to the moment the last one collapsed into molten slag. Precisely 423 seconds passed. No deviations, no fluctuations, like it had been choreographed. After the silence, I transmitted an urgent query to Delcar High Command. They thought I was joking. I sent sensor data, visuals, telemetry, full spectrum scans. They responded with laughter, then concern, then nothing. My relay was restricted. Encrypted orders followed. Do not engage. Do not interfere. Observe only. Observe what, exactly? The complete dismantling of a galactic war fleet by a species that still makes sandwiches with mayonnaise? I kept my eyes on the man. He descended from the roof as casually as someone ending a lunch break. The child beside him giggled at something he said, and they walked off toward a nearby shelter. No high fives, no speeches, no indication that they had just survived a level 4 orbital assault. Because they hadn't survived it. They'd expected it. Every human I scanned that day had a biometric signature within acceptable stress thresholds. No elevated heart rates, no adrenaline spikes, no fear. They didn't resist the attack. They absorbed it. Then they erased it. When the bald man reappeared later that afternoon, he was no longer in civilian gear. He wore a black uniform with no insignia, just a simple patch on the shoulder, SCC. I didn't recognize the acronym. Not at first. Then I found it, buried in a declassified Terran archive, one they'd made deliberately boring. Strategic Contingency Command. A defunct planetary program, allegedly disbanded, not even a military branch, a planning bureau. But that man? He issued 6 orders via local comm channels, each one precisely worded and time-delayed. Each broadcast carried embedded security strings, not encryption, but what we would later understand as human behavioral locks. Codes that could only be validated by individuals whose brain patterns matched expected stress reduction curves. Not passwords, not clearance, calm. They made their own command systems read emotional stability. You needed to be calm to access retaliation protocols, not brave, not strong, calm. I remember laughing, briefly, weakly, at the irony. The Zaikhal had built cultures around war chants and psychotic zeal. The humans had built theirs around stillness. I intercepted one of the SCC's comms bursts hours after the attack. It was addressed to Earth Command, and despite heavy linguistic corruption, I'll never forget the structure of the message. 7-minute neutralization confirmed. 12-node reactive tether successful. Civilian exposure minimal. Request permission to deactivate Contingency Theta 7. Standing by for planetary directive. Contingency Theta 7. I ran it through every index I had access to. Nothing. No references, no simulations, not even whisper logs from their former allies. It didn't exist, which meant it absolutely did. That was the first time I considered something radical, terrifying. The attack on Kessler-Nine wasn't unexpected. It was allowed to reach a specific threshold, allowed to escalate, allowed to reveal something. Not just a defense protocol, a message. Zaikhal war doctrine relied on overwhelming force and religious fury. They attacked to dominate, to destroy. Humanity had responded with mathematical precision, surgical calm, and something else, something I hadn't understood yet, but could feel crawling along the edge of my spine. Timing. They didn't just fight back, they scheduled it. There was something in the timing. That thought haunted me through the night cycle, as I stared at the event logs, the telemetry spikes, the absence of counterfire. It gnawed at the back of my mind like a misaligned fractal, the sense that I hadn't just witnessed a defense, I'd witnessed a script. The Zaikhal weren't just outmaneuvered, they were outpaced, outtimed. Every move they made, every pulse round fired, every shift in flight pattern had been anticipated. It was like watching a dancer flail wildly inside a cage they hadn't noticed was already built. The bald man, now confirmed as Commander Elliot Grange, had a history that should have been mundane. Public records listed him as a disaster response coordinator, then as a logistics consultant. No war record, no medals, no honors, except, of course, those records were curated. I spoke to a contact within the Orion Accord's Deep Archive Corps, an old debt repaid in secrecy. He sent me what he could find, and even that came with a warning. Whatever you're chasing, stop. We looked into the SCC a decade ago. 3 analysts went missing. The 4th resigned and now lives in silence on a farm under a different name. No one probes that deep and stays untouched. Untouched, like the humans wanted to be underestimated. The more I examined Grange's behavior during the Kessler-Nine incident, the more convinced I became that every step he took had been measured. When he stood on that roof, it wasn't to check the skies. It was to watch the response. I returned to the telemetry. The pattern of the ship dissolutions matched something I had seen only once before, during a blacklisted Del Car experiment in gravitic shell collapse. It was considered too unstable for field use, abandoned due to the uncontrollable chain reactions it could cause in molecular cohesion. But the humans had used something like it, or worse, better than it, more refined, more deliberate. Their version didn't cause chaos, it caused specificity. Ships didn't detonate, they ceased to exist in the exact way that would terrify observers the most. The psychological warfare embedded in their restraint was staggering. I presented my preliminary report to the Galactic Council's security branch. They dismissed it as emotional exaggeration. The Zaikhal fleet must have triggered dormant human minefields, they said. Coincidence, luck, hidden infrastructure. I wanted to scream. Luck doesn't melt ships gently. Hidden infrastructure doesn't know to pause between kills for maximum theatrical impact. That's when it hit me. The humans weren't just defending themselves. They were testing us, not militarily, intellectually. They knew we'd be watching, knew we'd be recording, knew we'd try to analyze every move, and what they gave us was a puzzle we couldn't solve. This wasn't a show of force, it was a correction. We had placed them low in our equations, assumed they were behind, crude, short-lived, emotional. We plugged them into galactic models as a variable of negligible weight. But they had seen the equation too, and they had written in the margin, "Your assumptions are flawed." The worst part? They didn't need to say it aloud. I have seen many wars. I have watched civilizations burn under ion storms and planetary railguns. I have heard the screams of warriors and the silence of extinction. I have witnessed fleets reduced to vapor trails across the void. But I have never seen anything like humanity's protocol trees. They were not war plans, not even by the most liberal definition. They were philosophies, turned into cascading logic structures, each node a branching possibility nested inside thousands more. I came across them, buried in what I assumed were civilian disaster simulations, until I realized they updated in real time. SCC protocols weren't activated, they were released, as if humanity had already played out every war, every disaster, every atrocity, in silence, in simulations we never saw. The real world was just where they waited to see which version they'd need. Theta-7 wasn't even close to their worst. A classified leak, possibly deliberate, contained a debrief of Protocol Omicron-1. It was tagged Planetary Ethics Suspension, Single System Suppression. The notes chilled me. Do not use unless enemy civilization poses existential threat. Use of Omicron-1 will destabilize up to 6 adjacent star systems, casualty projections, non-calculable, moral weight, terminal. They'd weighed the moral cost. They didn't build weapons. They built decisions. I returned to Kessler-Nine, or what remained of the surrounding space. A human cleanup vessel had arrived. Sleek, silent, labeled simply Recog 42. It wasn't armored. It wasn't manned, at least not visibly. It moved between orbital fragments and deleted data from drifting wreckage. Not collected, deleted, at the source. I tried to transmit data to my own relay. The signal jammed, not interfered, jammed selectively. The drone had identified me, chosen me, and cut me off. I backed away, fast. Later, I found one of their fail-safe triggers embedded in a corrupted archive. It was a warning, encoded in plain language. This node has been accessed outside standard clearance. Flagged by SCC, behavior index below tolerance threshold. Surveillance activated. It wasn't just that they were watching. It was that they'd already prepared for me to look. Commander Elliot Grange appeared again, this time via public feed. A press conference, or the human version of one. He spoke without rank, without applause. Just a man standing in front of a minor media relay, giving answers that told nothing and meant everything. A reporter asked if Earth planned to escalate. Grange paused, then said, "We don't escalate, we conclude." Another asked what SCC stood for. Grange smiled. Situational context control, not strategic, not command, not even contingency. Just context. They weren't waiting for war. They were redefining it. I stared at the screen, heart pounding, and realized what had disturbed me most this entire time. They had never called it an attack. Not once. Not in any report. Not in any transcript. Not in Grange's voice or the protocols themselves. To them, Kessler-Nine wasn't a tragedy. It was a case study. It took me a long time to understand that they hadn't shown us power. They had shown us patience. That was what grated on every observer I spoke to in the following weeks. We wanted fury, retaliation, escalation. We expected righteous vengeance or triumphant declarations. Something, anything to hold on to. But all we received from Earth was a diplomatic silence, cool, measured, not icy, just still. And that stillness was far more terrifying, because it meant they weren't racing to catch up. They weren't struggling to interpret what happened. They had already accounted for it. The Galactic Council eventually demanded formal debriefs. Earth sent precisely one representative. A junior analyst with a tired face, a second-hand suit, and the demeanor of someone halfway through a very dull spreadsheet. His name was Theo Wells, and he introduced himself without titles. He brought no bodyguards, no advisors, no war council. He brought a binder. Inside were exactly 7 pages. Each one had a single line. Page 1. The Kessler-Nine incident lasted 7 minutes. Page 2. No external defense systems were activated. Page 3. Casualties, 0 human, all Zaikhal vessels neutralized. Page 4. Contingency Theta-7 was initiated under SCC authority. Page 5. This protocol required no weapon discharge. Page 6. No escalation is anticipated. Page 7. No further clarification will be provided. That was it. No anger, no rhetoric, no warnings. Just facts. Unemotional, blunt, final. When pressed, Wells simply replied, "Everything of relevance has already occurred." That phrase haunted me, because it meant we were already behind. They didn't consider us participants anymore. We were observers. The Council balked. Some accused Earth of hiding weapons of mass destruction. Others claimed their tech violated cross-dimensional treaties. I heard whisperings of sanctions, embargoes, even retaliatory shows of force. Earth responded with nothing. No mobilization, no fleet, no condemnation. Instead, they sent a transcript. It was from a civilian school on Earth dated 3 years prior. A high school-level ethics exam. One of the questions read, "If your enemy violates a moral boundary and threatens the innocent, what conditions must be satisfied before action is justified? Outline the acceptable sequence of proportionality, deterrence, and silent response." The answer key listed 12 steps. 12. They taught these things to teenagers, not how to build weapons, but how to decide. I replayed that scene in my mind, the child beside Grange, standing under the sky during the Zaikhal attack. They weren't preparing him to fight. They were preparing him to understand. At some point, I stopped calling them a species. They were a strategy. There was a time, not long ago, when we laughed at humans, not with malice, no, but with indulgence, the way one might laugh at a toddler building castles in a sandbox. Their obsession with art, with emotion, with trivialities like marriage ceremonies and dance. Their music, full of unfiltered sorrow and unearned triumph. Their ships, shaped not for efficiency but for aesthetics. Even their language, full of irony and sarcasm and metaphor, confused our AI translators for decades. They named battleships after poets. They painted their escape pods. They sent golden records into space with greetings in dozens of languages, as if the void cared for sentiment. We thought they were adorable. We thought they were joking. But I've seen the inside of a human threat simulation room now. Not a battlefield. A room. One of their learning environments used by cadets, teenagers, again, with outdated hardware and laughably low computing power. And inside that room, I saw something that turned my blood cold. A blank whiteboard. On it, someone had written, in pen, not digital glyphs, 4 words. What if they don't? That was the scenario. No enemies named, no specifics, just the possibility that someone might not act according to prediction. 1,000 species in this galaxy plan for what their enemy will do. The humans plan for what they won't, and they build their response trees outward from that silence. That's what Kessler-Nine had been, not a trap, not a test, a response to a silence that had not yet come. They had already assumed the Council would hesitate, already assumed the Zaikhal would act impulsively, already assumed we would be watching, and doubting, and so they had modeled that doubt, simulated it, refined it, weaponized it. The records from that simulation room showed that contingency Theta 7 was modeled 11 years ago, as part of an exercise. The question posed, how do we respond to being considered irrelevant? The answer? 7 minutes. That's all it took to erase a presumption. The real panic didn't come from the Zaikhal's defeat. It came weeks later when the Varnak Alliance, long considered Earth's political ally, requested access to SCC files. Earth declined. Politely, formally. No malice, just refusal. A non-response so tactful it sent a diplomatic sector into disarray. If Earth hides such weapons from its friends, the Varnak ambassador said, how can we trust them not to use them on us? And in that moment it began, the turning. Humanity didn't need to fire another shot. They just needed everyone else to realize that they never even raised a weapon. And still won. Every species with ambitions, every empire with pride, began to reassess. Not Earth's strength, Earth's intent. That's when I understood the truth. Humans aren't playing a different game. They are the game. And we've all been moving through rules they wrote while pretending not to play. On the 53rd day after the Kessler-Nine incident, the disassembly began. It was not declared. It was not announced. It simply started. The Zaikhal homeworld, Korgun, lost orbital communications for precisely 13 minutes and 19 seconds. When they came back online, 32 defense satellites were gone. Not destroyed, not disabled, gone, as if plucked from orbit by a hand that refused to leave fingerprints. The Varnak trade relay over Sintar Beta registered a ghost pulse, a false signal mimicking a solar flare. It lasted 2.6 seconds. In that time, 3 of their primary FTL trading lanes rerouted through what used to be neutral Earth space. A week later, the Varnak received an apologetic message. We've noticed the rerouting. We will not object. We're simply observing. No threats, no troops, just a redirection. But the real moment, the true break in the illusion, came when the first human enforcer drone was caught on camera. Not officially, not by Earth, by us. A Delcar observation outpost on the rim of the Delharn belt captured footage of what was assumed to be a solar probe entering the remains of a Zaikhal black site facility. The footage was grainy, no insignia, no markings. But the drone stopped mid-flight, not malfunctioning, not drifting, waiting. And then, like a pianist inhaling before the first note, it released 26 microfilament devices into the facility's hull. Each one wormed through matter like sound through smoke. No visible cutting, no burn marks, no stress fracturing. When the camera realigned, the facility's interior compartments had been surgically extracted, leaving hollow, perfect voids where there had once been weapons labs and data cores. No explosion, just absence, disassembly. The Galactic Council issued a formal protest. Earth replied with silence. Then a message was leaked, not to diplomats, but to us, the observers, the ones who were watching. It read, "Do not confuse patience with absence. The delay is not a hesitation, it is a calculation." That was when panic became contagious. Several frontier systems decommissioned their own armories without request. The Tharn Protectorate, long considered a neutral power, offered Earth a technology exchange, thinly veiled surrender by gift. Even the brutal Trask Consortium froze their anti-Earth propaganda lines. But Earth never claimed credit. Not once. They did not appear at war councils. They did not issue ultimatums. They just continued. One Zaikhal general tried to resist. Her name was Kulra Morn. She authorized an offensive data echo, infecting a dormant Earth satellite with a fractal code designed to cascade into their command systems. 2 hours later, every Zaikhal server went dark for 12 seconds. When they came back, a single message was encoded across every screen. "We received your message. Thank you for the test." It was signed, E. Grange. I could no longer sleep, not because I feared what they might do next, but because I realized something far worse. They didn't need to do anything. The fear, the repositioning, the collapse of alliances, it was all happening on its own. Earth was no longer enforcing anything. The galaxy was enforcing itself under the weight of what might happen if it didn't. And somewhere, I imagine Elliot Grange watching this unfold, not with satisfaction, but with confirmation. This is what they had designed for. No galactic decree announced the end of the Zaikhal Imperium. There were no surrender papers signed, no white banners raised, no dramatic speeches. Their fleet command dissolved quietly, their governors vanished into early retirement, their military doctrines, centuries in the making, rewritten without ceremony, and the humans never claimed victory. That more than anything broke us. We are a species of ceremony, the Delcar. When we win, we record it, we archive it, we turn triumph into tradition. But humanity finishes and moves on. The last official Zaikhal communique was a one-sentence press release. Effective immediately, the Imperium enters strategic hibernation. Strategic, hibernation, a euphemism for collapse. The Galactic Council tried to contain the narrative. They called it an internal restructuring. They claimed Earth's involvement had been technologically overstated. But the observers, the ones like me, knew better. We had seen the footage. We had traced the absences. We had tried to fill the silence, and instead had been swallowed by it. I received a personal message from a Zaikhal archivist days after the dissolution. It was short, terrified, clear. They didn't dismantle our systems. They dismantled our assumptions. I don't think we ever had a chance. The message ended with 3 words. We weren't ready. I wanted to respond. But what would I say? None of us were. Even now, the humans haven't deployed a fleet. They haven't demanded reparations. They haven't occupied a single world. And yet, trillions of beings have realigned their lives according to Earth's unseen expectations. Markets have shifted, treaties rewritten, militaries repurposed, languages updated. Yes, languages. The Varnak have officially removed the term primitive from their diplomatic glossary. The Trask have banned the phrase subwarp species. And the Council? They've created a new protocol, event class, human origin silence. It applies to any scenario in which Earth does something, and then stops doing anything at all, because that's when things start to change. The great irony is this. Most citizens still don't understand what happened. They weren't watching the broadcasts. They didn't study the protocols. They just woke up one day in a galaxy with fewer threats, safer, quieter, more careful. I was in orbit above Kessler-Nine when I realized it fully. The colony had resumed its civilian operations. No additional defenses were installed. No militarization. Children played near the crater where the first Zaikhal ship had fallen. Flowers were blooming along the edge. A small plaque had been installed. I zoomed in on it from my observation pod. It read, "For the moment when we remembered that preparation is not paranoia." No names, no mention of Earth. Just the lesson. I saw Grange one final time. Not in person, not in command. He was walking through that same crater, now a small garden. He knelt beside a sapling, touched the soil, said nothing, and then stood. Behind him, the child from before, the one who'd asked if they should be worried, was older now. Maybe by a year. He looked up at Grange. "Are they gone now?" Grange didn't smile. "No," he said, "but they know." There is a human phrase I once heard and never understood, until now. We forgive, we don't forget. I thought it was contradiction, a linguistic curiosity. But as with all human sayings, it wasn't about logic. It was about memory. And memory is the most dangerous weapon Earth ever developed. Because the war didn't end with Zaikhal, it ended with a database. We found it by accident. Or maybe we were meant to. Embedded in a derelict relay buoy drifting beyond the Valmari expanse. No encryption. No trap, just a list. Categorized, time-stamped, cross-referenced, names, coordinates, events. It wasn't comprehensive. It was curated. Every line referenced an act. Some long buried in galactic archives. A trade embargo that starved a human colony. A failed peacekeeping mission where Earth's medic corps was fired upon by mistake. An academic exchange where 4 Terran students were abducted. A miscalibrated border drone that killed a 12-year-old girl on a mining outpost. Not wars. Incidents. Most had been forgotten. Small, diplomatic footnotes. Earth hadn't forgotten. The document was labeled plainly, contingency referentials, deferred threads. A final line was appended. Resolved, Kessler-Nine. Next, TBD. I don't know what chilled me more, the content or the tone. There was no outrage in that list, no language of revenge, only bookkeeping. The galaxy is built on forgetting. We move fast, we expand, we evolve. History is something we revise when it becomes inconvenient. The Delcar, the Varnak, even the Trask, we all treat the past as raw material, shaped by the present. Humans treat the past as evidence. When I showed the document to the Council's Internal Security Office, their first question was, "Is this real?" It was. Verified 6 ways. It was real. And deliberate. Earth didn't leak this. Earth let it be found. Because they don't need to threaten anyone. They just need you to wonder if your name is on the list. The psychological ripples were instant. A dozen delegations launched internal audits. Old incidents were reclassified. Apologies were drafted for crimes no human had ever brought up. No demand came from Earth. But the fear of being next was enough. What do you do when a civilization has perfect memory? Not just records, but systems of moral tracking that extend generations. When even your minor errors are logged, preserved, categorized? You stop taking chances, you begin to act as if someone is always watching, because someone is. This isn't warfare, it's justice, slowly rendered. I finally understood something Elliot Grange once said, back during the only known SCC transmission to the Council. It was short, as always. History isn't behind us, it's beneath us. Step carefully. That's what the list was. Not a threat, a floor. And the galaxy is just now realizing what happens when you build your empire without checking what's underneath. They came to Earth on their knees, not literally, not yet, but close. It began with the Varnak. Once proud, silver-tongued diplomats who could twist the air into poetry and spin defeat into progress. They requested a closed council, offered to mediate regional stability compacts, and, this time, asked Earth to host it. Earth declined. No explanation. Just a single line. We do not mediate where our voice is uninvited. The Varnak amended their request within the hour. We formally invite Earth to speak on behalf of those who have been wronged and never answered. This time, Earth agreed. Within days, the rest followed. The Trask Consortium, the Aurelian Directive, even the Delcar, who had never before submitted to a neutral authority. They came with proposals, revisions, drafts of a new galactic treaty. It was to be called the Concord of Kessler. But not one clause had Earth's name written as aggressor. It was always the same phrase: Earth will serve as anchor. Anchor, not leader, not ruler. Anchor, the thing you build around, the point you measure from, the weight that holds the rest steady in the storm. And Earth did not gloat. The humans arrived late to the negotiations. No grand fleet, no ambassadors in silk robes, just one ship, old by most standards, and from it descended Elliot Grange, wearing the same black uniform with no insignia. His only gesture of command was a nod. He didn't take the center seat. He sat at the edge of the chamber, watching. They gave him the floor. He said nothing for 10 full seconds. Then, "This is not a treaty. This is an apology, and we accept it." No smiles, no satisfaction, only gravity. Someone, I won't name who, attempted to object, claimed that Earth had not earned such reverence. That power without oversight was dangerous. Grange turned to them. "We've had oversight. You called it irrelevance, and we respected your judgment." Silence. He stood. "We never wanted power. We wanted peace. But we learned something difficult. Peace requires teeth. So we sharpened ours, slowly, quietly, hoping never to bite. You came to us now because we didn't." And then he sat. There were no cheers, no applause, but no one spoke against it again. I was in that room. I watched 1,000 species wait for a single human to pass judgment, and he didn't, because that wasn't what Earth had come for. They had come to ensure it would never be necessary again. The Concord of Kessler was signed that day. It gave Earth no territory, no riches, no fleets, only responsibility. They didn't want control. They wanted consequence. I've returned to Kessler-Nine only once since the Concord. It was not for duty, not for analysis. It was something else, a compulsion I couldn't name until I stood again on that soft soil, where flowers now bloom where wreckage once smoldered. The air was clean. The colony had expanded slightly. New housing, a small school, an agricultural wing. No walls, no fences, no guards. But I felt watched, not by drones or satellites, by memory. Humans had left something behind here. Not tech, not force, a concept. That power doesn't need to be seen to be respected. That peace isn't passive. It is maintained, curated, defended, not by the sword, but by the soul that chooses not to draw it. I wandered through the memorial garden again. The plaque was still there. For the moment when we remembered that preparation is not paranoia, beside it, a new one had been added. In 7 minutes, we learned what centuries had not taught us, that mercy from the strong is the only kind that matters. I found myself sitting on a bench near the tree planted by Grange himself. I didn't expect to see him, but I did. Older now, or maybe just more still. He approached the tree like an old friend, his hands in his pockets, his eyes on the leaves. I stood quietly. He nodded. "Delcar, yes?" "Yes," I said. "Observer class." "Still observing?" I hesitated. "I think I've started understanding." He smiled faintly. "Good." There was a silence between us, but not the kind that needs to be filled. It was the kind that said we've both seen the same things and know there is no name for them. I asked what I had always feared to ask. Was it always going to end this way? He didn't answer right away, then softly. "We had plans for worse. We had hopes for better. But this?" He looked out at the colony. "This is acceptable." I wanted to press him. About the list. About Theta 7. About the protocols we'd never uncovered. About the power that still hums beneath the surface of Earth's civilization. A power no one has ever seen in full. But I didn't, because I knew it wouldn't matter. Earth had chosen peace, but not because they were weak, because they had imagined the cost of not choosing it, and refused to pay it. The galaxy still fears them, not because of what they did, but because they might do it again, without emotion, without rage, without warning, just because it became necessary. And worse still, they might not even need to act. They might simply remember. That is their legacy, and we are living inside it now.